replaced, cavities from having braces 3 different times, and an endless goldmine of wisdom teeth to extract. And the day before a big speaking event one year, I even had an emergency root canal. It started at 4 in the morning. Waves of pain every 40 minutes. The right side of my face would turn gray. One eye would go red. And I would enter a small space in my head where my dying tooth would scream, "There is no pain in this dojo." But there was pain in that dojo. Oh, there was. I went to work and tried to tough it out. I scheduled an appointment with a root canal specialist and then set my stopwatch to 24 hours because that's how long I had to make it. By the time my appointment rolled around, I wanted to front hug the dentist. I was so happy to be there. I was moments away from freedom. I was on the edge of relief and I was ecstatic. But it didn't quite go the way I thought it would. 90 minutes into the procedure, I was still in agonizing pain. Apparently, I have roller coaster roots that flip and turn inside my teeth. The dentist couldn't just use an electric tool to kill them. Instead, he had to also use hand tools and slowly twist his way with a long, thin file into tiny holes he had drilled into my teeth. Imagine someone spinning a titanium needle back and forth between their thumb and index finger deep inside your tooth for an hour and a half. I asked for more Novocaine. Based on the pain I was in, I figured the dentist would say, "Sure, hook up this Camelback hydration system and drink it through a straw. Have all you want. It's pineapple flavor. You'll love it." Instead, he said, "I can't give you any more. I've already reached the limit of what you can handle. If I give you any more, your vision will blur." My first thought was, for how long? I'm not reading a book right now. I'll get a cab to take me home. Are you saying my vision will blur forever or just for a few hours? I promise I don't need perfect vision for the rest of this day. I'm not performing any open heart surgeries. Give me the Novocaine. He wasn't budging. So I sat there with bolts of electricity shooting through the nerve highway of my mouth. I thought I had reached the worst point until I felt a hygienist place something small in my hand. Did that really just happen? I thought to myself. Did a hygienist just place a ball in my hand to squeeze because it's about to get even worse? What century am I in? I'm not getting a Pancho Villa bullet removed on a battlefield right now. A ball? Seriously? Is there a strap of leather I can bite down on too? Just go ahead and give me a shot of whiskey while you're at it and heat up a blacksmith's iron to cauterize the wound. On that day, driving home from the endodontist's office, it was not difficult to understand why I worked. I had purpose and motivation to continue being an awesome employee. I would have worked at a sewage plant that day if it meant I could pay for the mouth demon to be exorcised. We forget those things sometimes. We get really focused on our own stuff and our own dreams, and we lose sight of the many, many reasons it is critical that you do great work at your day job. That's why, as I write this, I'm wearing a silly band. I have 2 little daughters, and although sometimes silly bands are used as currency at our house, much the same way cigarettes are used in prison, they help me remember one of the big reasons I work. I work so that my kids can eat and wear clothes and sleep indoors. Sometimes I forget things like that. In the midst of chasing my dreams, I get lost in being selfish and self-serving. I act like I'm the captain of my own planet, and my actions only impact me. There's a wild amount of self-confidence needed to successfully chase a dream, and it's easy for that to mutate into pride and arrogance. So it might be good to remind yourself why you're working. And that's not an exercise that only moms and dads can go through. Regardless of whether you have kids, it's good to reconnect to the often quiet reasons you actually go into work. Be honest. When is the last time you thought to yourself, number 1, I'll be able to eat this week because I went to work. Number 2, I'll be able to sleep out of the rain this week because I worked. Number 3, I'll get to wear shoes today because I have a job. Number 4, if I break my pelvis, I will have the insurance to pay for it. Number 5, I will not have to canal my own roots because I work. Number 6, I'll be able to support a non-profit organization because I work. Those apply to everyone, not just parents or spouses. Take 5 minutes and write down all the reasons you really work. The better you know them, the easier it will be for you to fall in like with a job you don't love. And if you're having a tough time coming up with them, try these methods. Look for parallels. A year ago, I spent almost every morning of the week writing satirical observations about church and Christianity. I spent almost every day of the week writing technical copy for an IT company. In the mornings I would blog, "Please don't interlink digits with me at church if the minister asks us to hold hands. I don't know you that well, stranger, and it makes me feel like we're going to make out." In the afternoons, I would write the 2-word label, Credit Center. That was how I spent a good deal of my job, writing labels and error messages and instructions on how to use a financial calculator. It was not glamorous work. It was not the fountain of creativity I might have been looking for, but there was a direct parallel. It was not difficult to see that learning to write with brevity and clarity at work provided direct benefits to my ability to write with brevity and clarity at home. But what if you work at Starbucks and want to be a songwriter? What if you work at a Starbucks and you want to be a CPA and open up your own business? Or you're a stay-at-home mom and you miss the work you used to do in an office? Where are the parallels there? Let's look at some of those examples. We'll go ahead and take the Starbucks barista versus songwriter discussion off the table. If you want to write songs and you're surrounded by people and stories all day in one of the most communal places on the planet and you still can't see the connection, you're probably not going to make a good songwriter. Instead, let's look at Starbucks barista versus CPA. If we sat down to talk about the parallels between these two, here's what I would tell you. Number 1, Starbucks is going to teach you about money. That's what being a CPA is all about. You'll handle hundreds of dollars a day as a barista. What patterns do you see? What math is present in simple economic transactions? When does the manager balance the books? If this Starbucks was one of your clients, what sort of accounting grade would you give them? If you were going to analyze the financial health of this location, where would you start? Number 2, Starbucks is going to teach you about people. As a CPA, you will have clients. What do you do at Starbucks to delight your customers? How did the people who are regulars become regulars? What have been some customer service mistakes you've made that would cost you 10 times that amount of business if you made them as a CPA? What qualities does Starbucks look for in managers? Could those be the same qualities you look for in employees you might hire someday? Number 3, Starbucks is going to teach you about marketing. Coffee is cutthroat, and the economy has made things even harder. How has Starbucks responded with marketing? Does your location get involved in the community? What would be the grassroots version of an expensive marketing campaign Starbucks did? How could you adapt it? The parallels go on. But again, maybe that example is too easy. Let's talk about stay-at-home moms. You've got 2 kids under the age of 6. We're not talking about finding parallels between 2 salaried jobs. We're talking about finding parallels between a 24-hour-a-day job and, let's say, a desire to be a project manager again. My wife was a project manager at both an ad agency and a construction company. Let's say she came to me one day and said, "John, I can't do this anymore. I want to be a mom and a project manager again. But those aren't related at all, and I don't see any possible parallels." 3 questions I would ask her and you. Number 1, why? That's usually the best question to start with. I would first and foremost want to know why my wife wanted to be a project manager again. Maybe she didn't want the job back. She just wanted to feel in community with other people. Maybe it wasn't about the specifics of the industry, but instead about feeling like you're responsible for something outside the house. If that's the case, then we can look for a million freelance opportunities and not just limit ourselves to construction companies and ad agencies. Number 2, how much time can you give it? It only generates obscene amounts of hurt and frustration to pursue a 40-hour-a-week dream in a week that currently has 4 hours of available free time. It's useless to talk about finding the parallels between a full-time job and being a stay-at-home mom if you've only got a few hours in a week to dedicate to it. Instead, for now, scale down your discussion. Make sure you're not comparing apples and oranges. Compare your stay-at-home parenting to a part-time freelance gig if you're not ready to jump in with both feet. Otherwise, you won't make a fair comparison. Number 3, how can you start small? This is the golden age of freelance. In the 1950s, you couldn't go online, find a quick-hit freelance job, knock it out at home, and feel good about completing a new project while keeping your eye on the kids. Find ways to start small. I would tell my wife that she should start reading blogs from project managers. She's been out of the field for more than 6 years. Thinking she can jump back in without at least a minor degree of re-education would be crazy. I tell her to read the freelance posts on Craigslist to see if there are any small parallels between how she currently spends her days and the ways people are requiring freelance gigs to be completed. I would help her go small long before I would help her go big. I didn't mention the parallels between a day job and a dream job that involve an office because most of them are obvious. Regardless of the specifics of the two office jobs you are comparing, you will need to be amazing in meetings at both jobs. You will need to have a well-oiled communication system. You will need to build a network of relationships internally so that you can get stuff done, and externally so you can foster the brand, your own or your company's. The parallels are endless in most situations, but let's pretend they're not in your world. There are absolutely no parallels between your day job and your dream job. How do you fall in like with a day job like that? You look instead for purpose. The purpose filter. Dream jobs and day jobs are two-way streets. When you look for parallels between your day job and your dream job, you're usually looking in one direction. You're asking, how can this job impact my dream? But the things you learn pursuing your dream can also benefit your current job. What happens when you ask, how can this dream impact my job? That's more of a purpose question than a parallel question. Asking it saved me during my 2-year incubation at Autotrader.com. In the fall of 2009, I used some of my vacation days from work to go speak at conferences around the country. This was an incredibly fun thing to do, but I started to grow bitter about the re-entry process. I was angry about the widening gap between my day job and my dream. On one particular morning, I broke down and started crying in the airport. For the record, I cried in the Chicago airport, not the Atlanta airport. And the tears were brief, subtle, and related to a pair of khaki pants I didn't want to put back on. It was 4:30 a.m., and I was walking in O'Hare. Hours earlier, I had spoken to a crowd of hundreds as the closing keynote for a creative conference. Hours later, I would be back at my day job, and the whole thing would feel like it had never happened. I knew the closer I got to my hometown of Atlanta, the more faded the memory of Chicago would become. The khakis were part of that. They were hanging in my car in the parking lot at work. After spending 21 hours in Chicago, I would fly to Atlanta, ride the train to work, grab my office clothes, and change in the handicapped bathroom stall. In a few minutes, I'd transform back into day job guy and disappear in a sea of cubicles. I didn't want to wear those khakis. I didn't want to do the reverse Superman. I didn't want to jump into the phone booth and put back on normal clothes. Why can't I do this other thing all the time? Why can't I just quit my day job and be free to pursue my dream right now? These thoughts were cascading in my head when I called my wife. I'm here. I landed. I'm safe. I'm going to ride the train and change clothes. I'm going to stop being Superman. Without missing a beat, she replied, Superman needed Clark Kent. Being Clark was the reason he was able to be Superman. It was how he stayed real, how he connected to real people. He couldn't be Superman the whole time. He knew the problems of the day because he was around people. Go be real. Go be connected with the people you work with instead of being a non-stop Superman. Go be Clark Kent, John. She was right. Although I was getting better at finding ways to hone skills in my day job that would later serve me in my dream job, I'd never looked at it the other way. I'd never taken the time to say, how can this dream impact my job? I had failed to see my job through the filter of my dream. My dream that began with the Stuff Christians Like blog was about people. It was about creating honest conversations about a subject that sometimes doesn't get talked about in an honest way. Faith. My purpose was to connect with people and create fresh dialogue about that part of my life. That's what the Stuff Christians Like blog and the book and ultimately that dream were all about. Guess who I was surrounded by all day at work? People. In my ignorance, I had acted as if there were no way to use my dream to improve my day job. I was standing at a window, staring at the horizon, hoping someday my dream job will allow me to reach out to people and change lives. If only it would come sooner. I can't wait to connect with people. Then I would climb into my cubicle cave and ignore all my coworkers, who were people, by the way. Real people with real hopes and real dreams. Seeing this gross oversight changed the way I looked at work. I had a higher purpose to go to all the meetings and fill out all the paperwork and work as hard as I could on my projects. I still got grumpy and impatient at times, but more often than not, I was able to remember my real purpose for being there, my dream-related purpose, People. I don't know the details of your dream. I don't know how the purpose of your dream applies to your current job, but I know it involves people. On some level, every dream involves people. And unless your company is staffed by robots, save for you, you've already got the start of a purpose to change the way you look at work. And if you're honest about your dream job and honest about your day job, there's no end to the number of ways you can find greater meaning in one of the last places we tend to look, the place we spend at least 40 hours a week. I just want to go off script for a second. Last night, I was talking to my wife about this very situation because at one point I said, I can't do this anymore. This dream is taking way too long. I have to give up on worrying about it, worrying about trying to get a book deal. And I really started to focus on people at work and just engaging with people and caring about people. And I had this lunch one average day, and it was two guys that were going through divorces that I was friends with, and I was trying to connect them so that they could talk with each other and share with each other. And my wife called me on my phone and said, hey, just got an email. You got the book contract. They want to publish the first book. And that was so exciting, but it was weird because it wasn't the big neon excitement I thought it'd be, because I had found excitement and joy in being at my day job and sharing my life with other people and seeing their lives change. And so it became two things I really loved doing, and not just one that I hated to do until my real thing started, but I actually started to see the purpose of my dream at my job. 3 pretty easy ways to ruin your day job and your dream job in the process. I'll admit it. Sometimes you haven't experienced a root canal in a long time. So working to avoid tooth agony is a really ineffective motivator. Sometimes you're single and you don't have kids or a wife or even an above average cat you need to care for. So being able to support someone else isn't a highly motivating reason right now. Some days you'll be particularly eager to ignore all the reasons to fall in like with a job you don't love. Let's face it. Some days, corporate sends out a memo that you can no longer have coffee at your desk and are now only allowed water and hard candy. Worse than that, they won't even explain what to do with caramel that starts off hard but goes chewy almost immediately. I literally had that day and many other more serious challenges that made surviving a day job feel impossible. Believe me, I get it. When you write a book that has elements of your life in it, it's incredibly tempting to paint yourself as the hero, to shine your mistakes, overlook your stumbles, and paint a smiley face over the experience. I don't want to do that with the 3 years I spent at Autotrader.com. In addition to many of those days being incredibly difficult, I also made a lot of mistakes along the way. In doing so, I discovered 3 pretty easy ways to ruin your day job and your dream job in the process. I hope the following missteps can serve as lessons you don't have to learn by personal experience. Number 1. Steal from work. Don't ever complain about traffic around someone from Los Angeles. She will giggle, rub the top of your head, and tell you, "That's adorable." Then she will proceed to assert you have no idea what real traffic is. But regardless of what she might say, Atlanta traffic is legitimately gross. So while I lived there, I would beat it by leaving the house at 6 a.m. and doing personal writing at work before my workday started. If I wrote at home in the morning, I could almost hear Interstate 400 filling up and found it too distracting. When the Stuff Christians Like blog first took off, I used to write each day's post about 3 minutes before it would go live, in my cubicle. Doing that meant there were some mornings where I wasn't quite finished by 8 a.m., when it was time to start doing my work for which I was being paid. 8:10 would come, then 8:20, and I was still blogging away. I was late for work, even though I was physically there. The romantic way to look at it is that my dream job bled over into my day job. The candid way to look at it is that I was stealing from work. When you do your dream on work time, that's stealing from your employer. Look for the parallels between your day job and your dream job. Find a way to see how your dream's purpose can improve your job performance, but don't spend time doing something for which you are not being paid. Your employer didn't hire you to pursue your dream on work time. They hired you to fulfill a job description, and you accepted it. You have a duty to complete that commitment. It's tempting to ignore that commitment as your dream gains momentum. It was hard for me to work on a corporate memo when the chance to interact with thousands of people on my blog was calling me. This is my dream! So shiny, so fun, so not what I was hired to do. The first lie we tell ourselves is that we'll just work longer hours and make it up to them. But when you do that, work rarely wins. If someone is going to get cheated, it's usually not your dream. The second lie we tell ourselves is that we're able to get the 40-hour workload done in 32 hours. So conveniently, we have 8 hours left to work on our dream. Efficiency is great. I love that you're killing it at work. But if you find more room in your day because you hustled, that's not your room. That's their room. This was a struggle for me, and I had to attack this monster in a number of different ways. The first is that I started to get ahead of my blog. I would write weeks in advance so that I never had the pressure of finishing something before work started. Scheduling my blog posts and tweets ahead of time helped me focus on work during the day. The second thing I did was change the location I was pursuing my dream. I still preferred to write at work in order to avoid traffic, but now, instead of my desk, I went to an empty conference room. In that room, in that hour, I could write whatever I wanted to. As soon as I left that room, though, it was business time. That small but surprisingly helpful physical separation created a good barrier for me between my dream job and my day job. The third thing I did was find more work to do at autotrader.com. When I realized I was able to get all of my work done in less than 40 hours, I actively filled that extra time with other autotrader.com related activities. I applied for 2 leadership programs. I got accepted to one and was able to continue working hard for the money they were paying me. The final thing I did was treat autotrader.com like a client instead of a job. As a freelance writer, I would have never dreamed of billing a freelance client for hours I spent working on my dream. I only billed them for hours I spent working on their project. But in the average full-time job, especially at a medium to large company that isn't tracking billable hours, it's easy to forget that. It's all just one big pool of money and one big pool of working hours. You lose sight of the fact that real money and real consequences are involved with your actions. But if you flip the circumstances around, you'd never think it was right. If you took your car to a mechanic and they charged you for 7 hours of labor to fix it, you'd have a problem if 3 of those hours were spent spinning pottery. You'd be incredulous if when you complained about the bill they said, "We're sorry, pottery is our mechanic's dream. He loved ghosts. We put a wheel and kiln behind our shop, and he just really got into it the other day. He made some beautiful vases." Even though I was an office employee and not paid hourly like a mechanic, I began treating autotrader.com like a client, and it helped. Not only did I stop stealing time from work because they purchased 40 hours of work, not just 40 hours of my presence, I also began protecting my dream better. I was more than happy to work the occasional overtime that certain projects required, but I never had to make a habit of it and face stealing time from my dream job because I was honest and diligent with my day job hours. Number 2, think of your job as your adversary, not your advocate. When I worked at autotrader.com, I thought I got pretty good at seeing the company as a patron of my dream. When I got to use a vacation day to go speak at a conference, I recognized, wow, I'm getting paid by autotrader.com to be here today. They are helping to pay for my dream. I thought I was doing a great job of seeing them as an advocate and not my adversary. Until I got my dream job. 6 months into working at Dave Ramsey, my team leader set an aggressive goal to sell a lot of copies of this book. The goal felt really daunting and scary to me when I thought about it. My first thought was, I'll never make this goal happen. That changed to, I'm going to fail at this goal. And finally I landed on, he wants me to fail. I started to see my team leader as an adversary, not a supporter. I started to get worried that my dream was getting attacked by that sales goal. It wasn't. Not even a little. My team leader actually wanted my dream to succeed more than I did. Here's a text message he sent me one night. I feel a great responsibility to make sure you succeed, as defined by the greatest number of people hearing your message through multiple mediums. Thanks for trusting us with your gifts. Does that sound like an adversary or an opponent of my dream? Of course not. So why did I feel differently? I had just spent 12 years of my professional career feeling at odds with the companies I worked at. I spent a dozen years thinking I needed to scrap and fight for my dream against the man. It was me against the world. For over a decade, I looked at my job with an adversary mentality. When I finally reached my dream job, I had a really hard time not defaulting to that line of thinking. It's a way of thinking that first takes seed when you have to work a job that might not be perfectly lined up with your dream. Wage war against this poisonous thought. Do everything in your power to protect the way you look at your boss and your company. To the best of your abilities and reality, see them as patrons, advocates, and supporters, not enemies. It will make your time there easier and give you a much better shot at success when you close the gap between your day job and your dream job. Number 3, demand that your job meet the needs of your dream. Nothing kills a day job and a dream job faster than feeling like you're entitled to both. I scowled my way through dozens of meetings at autotrader.com with a heart full of ungratefulness. At Bose, I almost got fired and was called aloof, a major insult for someone whose gift is motivation, because I was so mad at that environment. On top of that, I added a degree of arrogance to my jambalaya of funk once my dream got a little successful. When my blog got big, I tried to help autotrader.com with social media. I had personally learned a lot about that wild, wild west that was social media, and I thought I might have something to offer. But that wasn't my position. I wasn't in marketing. I wasn't in product development. I was in IT. So despite my best attempts to contribute ideas about blogging, they really didn't need me to. At first, this killed me. On the outside of the building, I was speaking around the country on social media and growing one of the largest Christian blogs on the planet. But on the inside of the company, I wasn't doing anything remotely related to blogging. I remember one meeting where we brought in an expensive outside expert to teach us all about blogging. I made a point in the middle of the meeting, and she proceeded to tear me apart, saying something like, "You're wrong about blogging. You don't know about blogging or social media. You should learn about it." I called my wife as I walked back to my building after the meeting and told her that I appreciated the opportunity to learn humility. Or I told her I hated my job and was terribly disappointed that my stupid dream wouldn't happen already. It was one of the two. Instead of looking for parallels between my day job and my dream job, I started to demand them. I started to feel entitled to them, as though I deserved them. I didn't, though. My job had no obligation to meet all my dreams. They'd been clear about that all along. They hadn't changed. Only my attitude had. I hope there are countless overlaps between your day job and your dream job. I hope it's incredibly easy to see the parallels and find a purpose there. But sometimes it won't be. And when it's not, don't demand that your job meet the needs of your dream. That's not what your job is for. Besides, that's not our ultimate goal anyway. I only want you to fall in like with a job you don't love. You've already got one true love, your dream. And it's time to do something about that. I want to share an idea that's not in the book, but it was really helpful to me in the middle of a day job. And it's called Stop Swimming in Tennis Courts. You have approximately 2 options when you find yourself at a job you don't love. One of 2 things has to change. Your job has to change, or you have to change. Since we know that quitting right now can cause more damage than benefit to your dream, the job is not going to be what changes. We have to change. And that can start with changing how you see the job, which is something I learned when I waged a private war against an internal motto of Bose. Bose is a playground for engineers. That's what they said in recruitment videos at the Bose headquarters in Framingham, Massachusetts. And it was true. If you were an engineer, it was a veritable wonderland of awesomeness, or what I imagine the set of the film Revenge of the Nerds must have been like. The rest of the world might think you were a dork, but on the Bose campus, you were a rock star. You had the best equipment, the coolest projects, and the pick of the litter when it came to opportunities. If you were an engineer. If you were a creative writer, things were a little different. It's not that Bose was a bad place to work. In fact, in many ways, it was one of the best places I ever worked. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be, which was an advertising agency. Although the dot-com bubble had already burst at that point in 2002, there were still some of the prototypical internet agencies making news. I knew that somewhere in Boston, there were places where people with goatees and unnecessary scarves rode scooters to meetings and drank bubble tea while working on wildly fun projects with their golden retrievers. And I wasn't one of those people in one of those places, and therein lay the problem. My attitude about Bose quickly became toxic. Suddenly I interpreted edits people made on things I wrote as personal attacks. They didn't know me. They didn't care about my dream. This whole place is crazy. In little and big ways, I railed against the authority and poisoned my team. I couldn't stand driving there each morning. My angst and frustration would get louder with each mile I covered, until eventually it would peak in the parking lot outside of the building. Angry and hurt and depressed, I would walk in and start my job. Has a job ever felt like that to you? Have you ever felt like you've known what you wanted? to be at an ad agency and the job you have was flat out refusing to be that? You thought you'd get to cook more at the restaurant, but they only let you serve. You thought you'd be writing more, but instead you're editing. You were told you could help change the face of the company, but were instead micromanaged to near death. Sometimes it seems like the job we're hired for isn't the job we end up with. We expected oranges, but instead got apples. We wanted to be a director, not a best grip. We were told one thing, and something different happened. Although I think that does occur, sometimes I fear we're the ones that create that incredibly wide gap of expectations. I think sometimes we're the ones who try to swim in tennis courts. I realized something in the midst of my grumbling and whining at Bose. They had never promised me they were a cool advertising agency. In the job interview, they had not guaranteed bubble tea, or that I could bring a ferret named Che Guevara to work, or any such thing. They were a dry, serious company that did dry, serious things. And they'd been upfront about that from the very beginning. In essence, they were a tennis court, not a swimming pool. And the distinction had massive implications for my career survival. There are lots of similarities between tennis courts and swimming pools. They are both rectangles. They are both places where sports take place. You can get exercise doing both. People enjoy doing both. But their differences are really what defines them. A pool is deep and full of water. It is cool and refreshing and custom built for swimming and diving. It is an aquatic wonderland. A tennis court, on the other hand, is covered by asphalt. There is no depth like a pool. It is a flat, hard surface. When something comes in contact with a tennis court, it is naturally repelled. And if you try to swim on it, regardless of the stroke you use or the dive you perform, you will get significantly hurt. Shamefully, it took me years to realize this. I wanted Bose to be an advertising agency, a swimming pool, a place where I could creatively splash around with lots of other swimmers. I wanted big, wildly creative writing projects and fun clients and expense accounts. I wanted Bose to be a hip ad agency, but it wasn't. It was a playground for engineers, a tennis court. By design, it had always been a tennis court, and it would always be a tennis court. But that didn't stop me from trying to swim. For months, I flopped around on that tennis court swimming. I got so cut up and bruised trying to dive into that tennis court, doing the backstroke and floating about on an unforgiving surface. I was so mad at Bose and my bosses, acting surprised every time the concrete scraped or scratched me. In addition to wounding myself repeatedly, I missed the beauty of playing tennis. That's what happens when we give into the toxic sense of discontent. We get blinded from the goodness, no matter how small, of our current situation. We get so drunk on the blueness of somebody else's pool that we can't appreciate our own tennis court. I didn't learn to serve the ball. I didn't learn to rush the net. I learned less than I could have about branding and luxury advertising and a million other tennis lessons Bose wanted to teach me. Bose was one of the absolute best tennis courts in the world. But I was so busy trying to force it to be a pool that I didn't recognize the joy of tennis. So the question we're forced to answer is fairly simple. What are you expecting your job to be? Are you standing in the middle of a tennis court demanding your job be a pool? Are you getting scraped up trying to swim in a tennis court? Bose is never going to be a pool, and that's okay. Your job might be a tennis court too, and that's okay. The key is to recognize where you are for what it is and stop swimming in tennis courts. Admitting that, coming to terms with that, changed everything for me at Bose. It wasn't overnight. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly love it. Nor did I become an engineer and understand what a great playground the whole company was. Instead, I started to notice the fun one could have in a game of tennis. I started to see that just like swimming, tennis took stamina and hard work. I started to enjoy the parallels between the two sports while appreciating the uniqueness of tennis. And I started to plan my escape from that tennis court and started to look for a swimming pool. My dream job. Chapter 5. Wait on the main stage. We've got to get you on the main stage. My friend said this when I told him that a leadership group named Catalyst asked me to speak at all 3 of their events in 2011. Just not on the main stage. Catalyst is one of the largest leadership conferences in the country and is broken up into primarily 2 sections, main stage and labs. The conference is officially a 2-day event, starting on Thursday and finishing on Friday. More than 13,000 people attend. On Wednesday, as of